Tonight on Reporting Scotland, police vow to catch more fans behind violence and disorder around the weekend's Old Firm match. It comes as an officer was injured as missiles and fireworks were thrown, while the First Minister says it cannot be tolerated.
The clubs have got to address the behaviour of a minority of their fans whose conduct was just completely and utterly unacceptable.
Also on tonight's programme, 2 rape survivors have come together to campaign for changes to the parole system.
The criteria with which they make decisions about parole isn't clear to see, it's not clear to understand, it's certainly not made clear to the victims who are going through the system.
18 months after she was arrested and released without charge, former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon says she's heard nothing more about the police investigation into SNP finances.
Equal marriage.
And 10 years and 10,000 weddings. A look back at a decade of same-sex marriage in Scotland.
Coming up in tonight's sport, we look back on a cup final to remember on the pitch as Celtic defeat rivals Rangers on penalties following a 6-goal thriller at Hampden.
Hello, I'm Laura Miller. Welcome to Monday's programme. Now, you expect to see hustle and bustle on the streets in the lead up to Christmas, but not scenes like these. This is what shoppers in Glasgow were faced with yesterday when Celtic and Rangers fans clashed in the city centre before the League Cup final. One officer was injured and another man ended up in hospital. 2 men have been arrested and Police Scotland says it's retrospectively reviewing CCTV and social media footage. The First Minister has condemned the violence as completely unacceptable and called on the clubs to act. Here's our sports news correspondent Chris McLaughlin and a warning that his report contains flashing images.
It's a trophy reclaimed.
The scenes at full time yesterday after a pulsating League Cup final, a celebration of football. But hours earlier in the city centre, this. The police tried to contain gangs of supporters who did their best to confront each other.
Oh my God, get in, get in.
Get back! Get back!
One officer was injured and another man was seriously assaulted. In one pub, as the Rangers group pass, one tries to get in, he's punched back out, and moments later, a firework is thrown into the bar as those inside try to take cover. Today, little evidence of yesterday's mayhem, but anger remains.
The shop was shut for about 20 minutes with customers inside. Again, something that we shouldn't have to do this close to Christmas because it's our busy period as well. It's everybody's busy period in Argyle Street.
I saw the running battles in the street. Women and children hiding in shop doorways. It's absolutely disgusting, and both teams, their fans should be routing out these people that are doing these things and dealing with it.
Just makes it look like a hooligan town. You know, it certainly did feel like that last night walking around with the kids, and that's not exactly something we want to be experiencing here.
So what can be done to prevent a repeat?
For a minority fans, their behaviour was completely unacceptable. Police Scotland had that situation under control. But the clubs have got to address the behaviour of a minority of their fans whose conduct was just completely and utterly unacceptable.
At the match itself, fans ignored warnings not to bring pyrotechnics. The game was delayed until the smoke cleared. One fan was arrested for using a flare. A great game overshadowed by an afternoon of shame. So what now?
Well, Chris is here now. So what does happen now then?
That's the big question, isn't it, Laura? For now, some more reaction tonight. A strong statement from Glasgow City Council. Leader there, Susan Aitken, said that she wrote to Celtic and Rangers last year after a similar incident, and she says they did nothing. She went on to say the football industry seems to be quite happy to make money off these thugs, while decent folk have to live with the consequences. That's not good enough, she says. Also a statement from the SPFL talking about what happened in the stadium yesterday, talking about the fact they will investigate. I would expect more charges towards Celtic and Rangers for the fans' use of pyrotechnics. At Hampden itself, We also reached out, it should be said, to both Celtic and Rangers today. No comment from either club.
Is anything likely to change though? We do obviously have an Old Firm match coming up in January again.
Yeah, for change to happen, there has to be agreement. Now, interestingly, the government want more action from the clubs. You heard First Minister John Swinney saying that. The clubs want more action from the police and from the courts. Football won't take responsibility for what happened in the streets yesterday. There is some sympathy with that because it's outside of football itself. The police want more resources from the government. So for everyone to come together, there's someone that has to take the change forward and drive that change. I think most people will hope that the scenes that we witnessed around Glasgow yesterday will be the catalyst for some kind of change. But you're right, there is another Old Firm game coming up on the 2nd of January at Ibrox, and I think everyone is going to be watching that with interest.
Yeah, OK. Thank you very much, Chris. 2 rape survivors are calling for changes to the system which determines when certain prisoners can be released before they've served their full sentence. Ellie Wilson and Hannah McLaughlin want better information regarding victims' rights and a clearer explanation of the parole process. Our reporter Katie Hunter has more.
Me and Hannah connected with each other on social media.
This is a friendship formed from adversity.
It's become more than just supporting each other as survivors.
Ellie Wilson and Hannah McLaughlin are both rape survivors. Ellie is due to find out soon whether her attacker will be released from prison under supervision.
My rapist was sentenced to 5 years in prison. It's not even been 2.5 years and I'm already having to deal with this.
Decisions about whether certain prisoners can be released early are made by the Parole Board. Its job is to assess whether it's safe for offenders to serve the rest of their sentence in the community.
It was just such a shock.
Ellie says the parole process is confusing.
The criteria with which they make decisions about parole isn't clear to see, it's not clear to understand, it's certainly not made clear to the victims who are going through the system.
Ellie and Hannah have come together to call for changes. They say victims must have their rights and the parole process clearly explained. That victims must be given the right to attend any oral hearings, and if offenders continue to deny guilt, the Parole Board should give this weight.
My abuser and rapist was sentenced to 9.5 years in prison, but I know that that does not mean that in reality.
Hannah says rapists who don't admit guilt and don't show remorse shouldn't be released early.
We need that validation there of, OK, you're actually taking some accountability of what you did to us. I think the people that are able to make the decisions on this and to make some changes with it need to listen to survivors, and we're going through it, we have the lived experience of it.
So we risk assess the prisoner.
John Watt is chair of the Parole Board. We put some of Ellie and Hannah's points to him.
They are saying there needs to be better information. The parole process needs to be more clearly explained to victims. Do you accept that?
Yes. We've been trying for a number of years now to develop systems which will provide information and assistance to victims. But it still comes as a surprise to victims when the parole hearing comes around. And it can be a real shock, it can be devastating. I can't begin to imagine how they must feel. And there must be a way of smoothing that process, if you like, by speaking to victims as early as we can, when they're ready, of course. And if they want it, they don't want it, and that's fine, but if they want it, to explain broadly what a sentence means, and broadly when the prisoner will be considered first for parole, and the kind of things that we'll take into account.
The Parole Board says it looks at all relevant information when making decisions in the context of assessing risk, and that can include whether offenders deny guilt or don't show remorse. Some of Ellie and Hannah's requests would require law changes. The Justice Secretary, Angela Constant, says the Scottish Government will take their views seriously, and there have been a number of victim-centred reforms to the parole process in recent years.
There's so many things that could change.
Ellie and Hannah say they now hope the relevant people in power will meet them to discuss their proposals. Katie Hunter, reporting Scotland.
To some of the day's other stories now. And a 21-year-old who stabbed a man to death in Aberdeenshire has been jailed for 6 years. Michael Jenkins, seen here, died after being attacked by Alfie Whelan in Fraserburgh last June. Whelan had been charged with murder, but prosecutors accepted his guilty plea to the reduced charge of culpable homicide on the basis of provocation. A strike involving tanker drivers at Edinburgh Airport over Christmas and New Year has been called off, according to the company, at the centre of the dispute. The refuelling provider North Air say an agreement has been reached with the union Unite over pay, which means the proposed 19-day walkout that was due to begin on Wednesday now won't go ahead. A large minke whale has washed up on a beach in Ayrshire. Coast Guard teams were called to Irvine Beach this morning after the carcass of the mammal, which is thought to be up to 7 metres long, was found by dog walkers. North Ayrshire Council say they're monitoring the situation and making plans for its removal. And the Scottish SPCA is warning people to avoid purchasing puppies from illegal farms or unlicensed online sellers in the run-up to Christmas. The Animal Welfare Charity and the Crown Office say the practice could be helping fund gang-related crime in Scotland. They add that many puppies go on to suffer severe health problems and that those thinking about a puppy for Christmas should only buy them from authorised breeders. Nicola Sturgeon has said she knows nothing more about the police investigation into the SNP's finances than she did when she was arrested and released without charge a year and a half ago. Police charged the former First Minister's husband, Peter Murrow, with embezzling party funds in April, but the Crown Office is still deciding whether anyone should be prosecuted. In an interview with the BBC, Nicola Sturgeon was asked whether she was frustrated over how long it was taking.
It's not something I have any control over, and I don't think it would be surprising to anybody to hear me say, of course I wish it wasn't there, but it is what it is, and it will take its own course. In the meantime, I'm getting on with my life. I'm enjoying getting on with my life, and there's no point in me, talking about things I can't comment on anyway.
Well, let's speak now to our Home Affairs correspondent, David Cowan, who's outside the Crown Office in Edinburgh for us tonight. David, this investigation has been going on for a while now. What's the latest with it?
Well, yeah, Operation Branch Farm was actually launched more than 3 years ago to look into the SNP's finances and funding. It got away in July 2021. 20 months went by, and then in April last year, they arrested Peter Murrow, questioned him, released him without charge. The same process went through with Colin Beattie, the SNP's former treasurer, and then, of course, with Nicola Sturgeon. A year after he was first arrested, Peter Murrow was re-arrested and charged with embezzling SNP funds. The police sent a report on their findings to the Crown Office, the building and the scaffolding behind me, in May this year. And then in August, they sent in another report in relation to Nicola Sturgeon and Colin Beattie. And since then, prosecutors have been deciding what should happen next.
So is it a surprise that this is taking so long?
Well, I've spoken to a few people today, and it doesn't really sound like it is a particularly big surprise. Clearly, it's been a very complex and long-running inquiry. The prosecutors who've been involved in this case have been working on it with the police, but they're now having to go through those reports line by line to decide whether there should be a prosecution. It will be the most politically sensitive decision the Crown Office has had to take since the prosecution of Alex Salmons. But, the Crown will say politics has got nothing to do with this at all. It's all about the evidence and nothing else. Is there a case that should be put before a jury? Today I spoke to a couple of people who've been involved in this process, a couple of lawyers who've been involved in it in the past. They said that this kind of timescale is very much par for the course, especially as it involves financial crime. They pointed out that because no one's appeared in court yet, there's no clock ticking, there's no deadline, and this will just take as long as it takes.
OK, Dave, outside the Crown Office in Edinburgh, thank you. Glasgow needs an 18-month deep clean before the Commonwealth Games. That's according to the union representing the city's cleansing staff. It wants a £2 million scheme to tackle problems with rubbish and graffiti in the city centre. The council says it already has an action plan and intends to recruit extra staff. Our news correspondent Jamie McIver reports.
This was Glasgow city centre this morning, an area which prides itself on stylish shops and restaurants, but blighted by rubbish and graffiti. The council, unions and businesses all agree this risks harming the city centre's reputation. This is Royal Exchange Square, right by the iconic statue of the Duke of Wellington. But the pavements here are thick with chewing gum and the street furniture is covered in graffiti. On neighbouring Buchanan Street, some worry about the impression this gives.
Sometimes it worries me that people from abroad will look around and think this is not as nice as where they're coming from.
Especially the chewing gum, you see it a lot around the streets at the moment, and it kind of really gives that appearance of that it's not as clean as, you know, when you see the shops are so beautiful and tidy, and whereas the streets just make it kind of pull it down a little bit kind of thing.
But is the problem in Glasgow really worse than anywhere else?
Every city in Europe's pretty much the same, you know, so it's just needs a bit more looking after, I think, you know, for the amount we pay for taxes and that, you know.
The union representing cleansing workers in Glasgow has long-standing concerns. Today it called for more staff and a £2 million deep clean of the city centre.
We've had staff left in statutory services and are not being replaced. Our call now is quite clearly to get everybody around the table together. 150 additional staff is needed to deep clean this city, particularly coming towards the Commonwealth Games in 2026.
Glasgow City Council declined an interview, but says it plans to recruit more refuse collectors and has expanded the street cleansing team. Last month it announced a £400,000 project to tackle problems like graffiti and fly posting, and it's due to start in the new year. Jamie McIver, reporting Scotland.
Tonight's main news again. Police vow to catch more fans behind the violence and disorder ahead of yesterday's Old Firm match. 2 men have been arrested so far. It comes as an officer was injured as missiles and fireworks were thrown. The First Minister says it cannot be tolerated.
Still to come in the sport, Scots are in action at the World Darts Championship. We'll have the latest from the Alexandra Palace.
Now, it's exactly 10 years since the Marriage and Civil Partnership Act 2014 came into effect. It was a landmark moment, meaning same-sex couples in Scotland could marry for the first time. And since then, more than 10,000 couples have followed suit. Our political correspondent Phil Sim has more.
Equal marriage.
It's 10 years since same-sex couples won the right to get married in Scotland. Many were able to convert their civil partnerships on the day the law came into force, and within weeks the first weddings were held. More than 10,000 have followed since. Jerry and Susan Douglas Scott were among the first.
We've gone from the 90s when we were scared to lose our children, to come out and lose our children and have a secret ceremony on a little boat on the River Tay, through to couldn't have been more public 10 years ago, and celebrate not just us, but a fairer Scotland. So it really was about Scotland being a fairer place, more equal place, acknowledging our human rights, acknowledging us that love comes first.
Susan and Jerry had the First Minister as a witness at their midnight wedding.
It was a really special way to mark something that was a big political moment, and it was also a reminder that all politics is personal. This was a piece of legislation passed in a parliament in Edinburgh, but it literally changed the lives of many couples across the country.
And the Marriage and Civil Partnership Scotland Bill is passed.
The debate at Holyrood featured firmly held views, but was widely praised as earnest and well conducted. Some worry that it might be different in the more polarised political atmosphere today.
That it's still almost given a kind of special status as a matter of conscience. We do not say that racism is a matter of conscience, or sectarianism, or anti-Semitism, or Islamophobia. At least, political parties that want to be taken seriously have a responsibility to say we don't accept those views. And my community's human rights have never reached that point.
So the politics hasn't entirely gone away, but for many, this remains simply a happy anniversary.
I love you more now than I did then, I think, which at the time I thought was impossible, but our love has continued to grow and to
mature, deepen.
Okay, let's get tonight's sport now with Lewis. And you were talking about yesterday, but the actual football this time.
Yeah, there's plenty to get our teeth into on the pitch as well, Laura. Yes, as is always the case with these high-profile matches, particularly the Old Firm. There's plenty of talking points.
Yeah, indeed.
Thanks very much. Hello there, yes. Well, despite the unsavoury scenes off the pitch, what an occasion and what a game at Hampden as Celtic grabbed the season's first major trophy with an enthralling penalty shootout win over Rangers. Brendan Rodgers praised his side's composure when it mattered most, while Philippe Clement said he was proud of his defeated players after watching them play a huge part in a 3-3 epic. Paul Barnes has this report.
The final act of a festive cracker as Celtic wrestled the League Cup trophy back from their bitter rivals by the narrowest of margins.
we can be really proud of ourselves. In a difficult moment, we produced the moments that we needed.
Nadeem Bayrami's opening goal felt like a lifetime before that winning spot kick. But this deserved opener from Rangers cajoled Celtic into life. 2 goals in 5 minutes from Greg Taylor and then Dezan Maeda swung the size 5 shaped pendulum back towards Glasgow's East End. But Rangers and Mohamed Diamonde weren't finished. Nicholas Kuhn must have thought he'd won it, but Rangers' admirable resolve and the head of Danilo forced an extra 30 minutes. The penalties were exemplary until Ridvan Yilmaz stepped up. That left Maeda to conclude an absorbing afternoon.
The guy showed a big heart to come back from being behind in the game, and then to obviously show that composure in the penalties. And the most important thing is being at the podium at the end, and they achieved that.
Football is sometimes really cruel, but that they gave everything, and that I was proud about that. And penalties are always a casino game. Last thing, I hope that you guys really dig into things. I hope.
This is what made Philippe Clement seethe. Free kick, but no penalty. The referee's decision will be scrutinised by the Scottish FA's key match incident panel later this week.
We do believe, and I think that performance today showed that we have the quality to compete and to beat them. So for us, it feels like a matter of time, but we obviously want that sooner rather than later.
Celtic and Brendan Rodgers' recent dominance in this famous fixture continues, but it wasn't for the lack of trying from a Rangers side yet to taste Old Firm victory under Clement.
Celtic, overall won the game, and that's what winners do, and Celtic are used to doing that. But I think Rangers can take a lot of heart from that game. I did expect Celtic to win the game, not so much in the manner that they did.
A fascinating league encounter awaits on the 2nd of January. Paul Barnes reporting Scotland.
Well, there was one game in the Premiership yesterday, and it was a bit of a shocker for Hearts, who lost 1-0 away to a Kilmarnock side who played almost the entire match a man down, a result that left Tynecastle boss Neil Critchley here fuming. Kelly's Robbie Dees was sent packing after 6 minutes for a tackle on Kenneth Vargas, but his teammates regrouped and scored what turned out to be the winner. A Bruce Anderson penalty enough to earn the home side all 3 points. They jump up to 8th, but Hearts, who were booed off by some travelling fans, are bottom of the table with just 13 points from 17 games.
No, I'm not frustrated. I'm more than frustrated. I'm
angry?
Yeah, stunned, really. I'm shocked by that performance. I've not seen that from this group in my time here. That was miles away in every department.
We had the best chances in the game. We had more shots on target. We counter-attacked brilliantly. The players, when it comes to with 10 men, everybody needs to do a performance and a half, and that's what we got.
Rugby, and it was a disappointing result, but a spirited performance for Glasgow Warriors in their Champions Cup clash with Toulon yesterday. A 30-29 loss in the south of France that still managed to yield 2 bonus points. But it felt like a missed opportunity for Franco Smith's side, who were unable to stamp their authority on the match when the hosts saw 2 players sin-binned midway through the first half, but they couldn't make the most of the numerical advantage. Despite a late Glasgow surge, Toulon held on and edged the match by a single point. And plenty of rugby to look forward to as well over the festive period when Glasgow and Edinburgh go head-to-head next week.
Good stuff. Gosh, that was close, wasn't it?
It was indeed, it was.
OK, thanks, Lewis.
Cheers, Laura.
OK, now let's go over to Laura McKeever to find out what's happening on the BBC Scotland channel at 9 o'clock.
Tonight we'll have more as an alleged Chinese spy who's banned from the UK is named. We'll also talk about waste as councillors in Glasgow visit bin collectors who say there's a crisis in the city. And Scotland's Christmas Home of the Year is crowned this evening. We will speak to the winners, so tune in for that and more at 9.
And now Judith is here with the weather. Oh, this doesn't look good, Judith.
Well, do you know, wind will be the dominating feature of the windy type over the coming week, with strong winds right across the week, actually. So this is kind of indicative of what we're going to see unsettled. But the one common denominator is it's going to be mild as well. And it was a mild day today, a very good evening to you. And we did see some sunshine before dusk fell for many parts of the country breaking through. But let's look at the pressure chart to see what's happening for certainly the first half of the working week. This weather front here has been the front that's brought all that rain across the northwest Highlands. It's still with us tonight, but then it moves away, only to be replaced by a low pressure system increasingly winding itself up, bringing a swathe of high winds and heavy rain. Now, by the time we reach Thursday, we'll see a ridge of high pressure building in, so something a wee bit more settled to look forward to. Now, we still have a yellow rain warning in force for the northwest Highland, valid until 9 o'clock tonight. That rain keeps piling in. It's really, the totals have really mounted up. It does continue for the next few hours before easing as we head through the overnight period, I'm glad to say. Elsewhere, it turns drier as well. Some clear spells for the east, but cloud increasing with some rain into the west coast by the time we reach the end of the night, and winds will ease for a time and it will be mild. Now, a cloudy start for most of us tomorrow. Outbreaks of rain across western Scotland. They'll start to move in across the country as we head through the course of the morning. At the same time, winds back into the south and they'll strengthen, and by the time we reach afternoon, we're looking at some gale force winds for coastal areas. Certainly that rain just about knocking on the door of Shetland tomorrow, and some heavy rain to come for Orkney too. With a wee bit of shelter across northern Grampian, we should see something drier but windy for all of us. Mild temperatures though, a drier interlude across the south during the afternoon, maybe some hints of brightness, but gales developing down towards the Galloway coast and towards Kintyre, also the Inner Hebrides as well, and eventually up the west coast as well, with outbreaks of rain. As we head into the evening, that rain becomes progressively heavier. It moves right across the country, so a wet and windy spell as we head through the overnight period. Widespread gales for a time with us first thing on Wednesday morning. Early rain clears away to be replaced by blustery showers, but a much brighter day to come. Yes, it'll be blustery and it will feel a bit cooler as well. The showers mainly focused in the west. That's your forecast.
I'm losing faith about the prospect of a white Christmas, Judith. We'll talk about it later.
The balance.
Thank you. And that is Reporting Scotland. I will have your late news about 10:30 tonight. Join me then if you can. In the meantime, from all of us here, enjoy your evening. Good night.